Welcome to the MSP Studios in Bootle for the latest In Conversation with Voice of Business for Liverpool Chamber of Commerce. It's a session with representatives of our member businesses talking about a topic of pertinence to the local business community. And today we're going to be discussing the issue of regeneration and what it means to the City of Liverpool and to the people who join me here in the studio today. We've got a fantastic panel of representatives who are going to be discussing the topic this morning. I'm going to introduce them one by one. We've got Chris Wayne from Hive Projects, Sue Patterson from the Manufacturing Technology Centre. We've got Sean Keys, MD of Sutcliffe. We've got Rachel Hennigan, who is the principal of Hugh, Baird College. And we've got Greg Johnson, who's the Chief Exec of Warwick Development. Thank you all for joining us today. So I'm going to start off with an open question to you all, which is about what does successful regeneration in the city region look and feel like from your perspective, both professional and personal? Who wants to take that nice, easy one to start with?
I'll go.
Go, Greg.
Oh, yeah. So, from Warwick's perspective, we were really proud to be involved in a regeneration project of the Welsh Streets. For anyone that doesn't know about the Welsh Streets, it's a terraced housing, 19th century terraced housing that is in Sutcliffe and was actually built by Welsh workers, originally for Welsh migrants that would come over to Liverpool in search of work. Actually, it's most famously known for Ringo Starr's birthplace, and he lived there up until he was about 4 or 5 years of age, I think. So the council actually acquired, after a period of decline, they acquired the properties. And they were set for demolition, to be fair. I think it was a new change of government at the time. And the onus was a little bit more focused on regeneration. And the council decided after a period of time to go ahead with the regeneration of the area. So we actually supplied and manufactured the windows and doors for over 300 properties. There's still one final phase ongoing at the moment. And it was only a couple of months ago I was actually on site at the Welsh Streets, and you walk down the streets now and there's a real sort of sense of community. They actually built the houses or regenerated the houses to the point where all the gardens out the back are communal spaces, like a safe space as well. They've got sort of key fobs for residents, and when I was down there you could really see the sort of the community feel. There was children out playing with neighbours' children, and give me a sort of sense of when I was a kid. You don't always see nowadays, do you, the kids out in the street playing and stuff, but certainly down there you really got that sense of community back. But then on top of that, you know, when we talk about Ringo Starr's birthplace and stuff, it's actually still, Madron Street is still part of the Beatles tour now to this day. So it's history and it's sort of culture of the city, which could potentially have been lost if we'd have, you know, bulldozed them and just built new houses, so to speak. So that for me, and being part of that and actually seeing the sort of the progression and the windows and doors going in and that sort of feel of community getting put back into the city, that was the biggest success that we've had to date, I think, in regeneration. Yeah.
It's interesting that Liverpool's almost become an exemplar of regeneration, you know, powering a future of a city, you know, post-industrial and such. And it's interesting that we talk about community, we talk about history, and we talk about that sense of place as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And regeneration means many, many different things to different people. So Rachel, from your perspective, obviously Hugh, Baird College is an anchor institution in the centre of Bootle. So where does regeneration fit in terms of your aspirations and your perspective?
It's funny what Greg said. Well, it's not funny. It aligns with what I think about in relation to positive regeneration. It is a happy mixture. I think about it as a really nice cake. It's a happy mixture of private investment, public investment. It's a mixture of community-based projects. So when I think about Bootle now, and what it could be in the future, it's education, it's private investment, but I don't want it to lose that community soul. So there's some amazing stuff that takes place in Bootle Strand already around the Big Onion, or whether it's the tool shed or the bike shed. But we have got to get that private investment in there as well. So it is that mixture, but without losing that community soul. But I think what is important as well is when we think about the ingredients of that positive cake of regeneration, it's how everything else impacts upon that. And I suppose that's the biggest challenge around regeneration. So how do you have those ingredients as well as really good housing, strong transport links? Because otherwise we'll end up with a situation where we've got some positive regeneration, but unless we get our housing stock absolutely tip-top, then people will move and go to live in different places, and then we're just in that continual level of disparity. But it is a happy mixture, but I wouldn't want Bootle to lose its soul without a shadow of a doubt. We just need a little bit of something else.
Mm-hmm. And Sean, from your perspective, if you're Sutcliffe, 30 years in business virtually, how have you seen things change, and what has been successful, and what feels like something that can be learned and built upon going forward in terms of successful regeneration?
So successful works on lots of levels. I could write a thesis on this. I wouldn't be able to do it, but I could write a thesis on it. So it is about education. So the best thing we can give all of our children, my mum used to say to me, the best thing I can give you is a great education. I did get a great education. I was lucky enough to go to University of Liverpool. I have been to local schools. It works. Then we need to keep hold of them, and eventually then they do years and years of good work within the city. We build lots of homes, so we've worked on the Welsh Streets with Warwick. I understand that story completely. Understand the story of the Welsh people come to the city. My family came over in the 50s, understand the purpose of education, but we're in the city region, we're building quality homes, and we're helping to build good colleges, and we're helping to rebuild the hospitals. We need equality in all those areas, and we need to give all those people the opportunities to continue, for them to continue to grow. But I'm going to be a bit of a stick in the mud on this. It's also got to be statistically true. So we've got to see the growth from last year and the year before be better year on year. So if we're hitting 2% and nationally it's 2.5%, it's not good enough. Now, I'm not saying that is the case, but we've got to be hitting the statistics where we want the growth. We need to keep hold of the talent within the city. We need to give them good homes, fantastic hospitals and fantastic schools. Just in terms of hospitals, we do have unbelievable inequality in this city in health. I haven't got the statistics off the tip of my tongue, but you can move from say Liverpool 15 to Liverpool 25, and your life expectancy can go up 10 years, which is utterly ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. They're miles apart. So that's something we're working on. We've currently just completed work at the Royal. We're looking at a couple of other hospitals around the region. And one final thing, which I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say. We raised £52,000 for the Royal Hospital last year. Incredibly proud. So I'm going to throw it out to all the big businesses out there. You should be doing exactly the same at the same level that we are. So we're an SME in the city raising £52,000 for our hospitals. I'll throw it out to all the big companies to try and better that. And if you better it, come and tell me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Challenge accepted, I think there. Sue, from an MTC perspective, you're obviously the cutting edge, the vanguard of technology development, methods of construction, etc. What does the positive regeneration look and feel like for you?
So for me, it's about, I agree with what Rachel said, it's about having that holistic view. So really looking at the entire value chain from whether we're looking at the creative digital, advanced manufacturing, health and life sciences sectors that we are developing in the city region. What comes with that is we need good quality housing, we need high level jobs, we need the skills development, we need the supply chain development, and we need to be looking at it right from beginning to end. So I think regeneration is making sure no one's left behind. We've still got, I'm from North Liverpool, we've still got areas that were at one point forgotten about, and I think it's really important. We've got the Everton Stadium going up now, and Everton and the community do an amazing job, but we've got to make sure that that community is brought along with the entire regeneration that's going on in the city.
Brilliant, thanks, Sue. Chris, from your perspective, you're there working with contractors and many different stakeholders around project management of some of these initiatives and schemes. You've obviously got a number of examples of where it's worked particularly well, but what are the key ingredients for successful regen?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I would agree with what's been said before. I think regeneration doesn't happen in isolation. There's multiple facets to positive regeneration, and I think going back to the second part of the question, I think there's a feel about it, and I think in Liverpool it feels very, very positive at the minute, and so I'm sure we'll get onto some of the big ticket events which have helped with that. I think from my perspective as a chartered surveyor, you tend to look at the physical regeneration, so where we're investing in assets in the city, and it creates that positive ripple effect across the city region. Maybe two examples I'll share. One is Liverpool Waters, so we're involved in the master plan development around Liverpool Waters, obviously strategically important for the city. Obviously Everton Stadium gets talked about a lot, but there's far more to that master plan than just the Everton Stadium. And that obviously is being led by Peel as the developer down at the waterfront, but multiple stakeholders have roles to play, including the City Council, the combined authority, and then other asset owners and developers who'll develop each of the plots. And then probably the other example I'd like to mention, obviously close to home literally, is what Sefton Council are doing with Samway Homes. So, very innovative housing model. They've set up a subsidiary within the council, working hand in hand with Sefton Council to create housing development sites on brownfield sites. And the first one is Bootle High School, obviously not far from where Rachel is. And, to make housing sites viable and attractive to people, there's a whole load of social infrastructure that needs to work around that, from healthcare, from education, etc. So I think seeing more of those physical interventions will have a fantastic effect on regeneration across the city region.
You've all touched upon the idea that regeneration doesn't happen in silos or with an individual thing, or successful regeneration doesn't happen in that sense. Just wonder, do you get the sense that we are as joined up as we should be? Where maybe some of the gaps that might exist? What you feel? You said feels very positive at the moment, Chris. Is that infrastructure there to work collaboratively and at the scale that's required to tackle some of the inequality challenges that Sean touched upon?
Gut feeling it's not quite there. I'd say it feels very positive. And I always think back, we did a regeneration conference, and you'll remember it, Paul, with the City Council some years ago, where the police commissioner got up on stage and basically said, Liverpool is the biggest exporter of organised crime, and it's all because of our poor economy. And this is quite some years ago. So it feels like we've really moved the dial. As a city region, we've really developed and moved on. And Sean's absolutely right. We need to continue to monitor that, with data and with evidence, and challenge ourselves around that. I think from a personal perspective, so we're working with the Royal around the demolition of the old hospital, obviously to create fantastic development opportunities around the Knowledge Quarter and the university. The City Council have been extremely positive in their engagement around that. Ditto around Liverpool Waters. It feels like genuinely partners are invested in what we're trying to do and trying to help. The combined authority, as I say, the whole Sefton Council Samway Homes model would not work without brownfield combined authority funding. And the combined authority have been fantastic to release that funding and been collaborative on the journey. So some small examples, but it feels like we're making really positive strides forward in that space.
I think it's hard, Paul, if I'm being honest, and I don't think it's necessarily through a lack of trying, but I don't truly feel we are yet joined up. I clearly understand my part to play in my locality with education and working with industry, employers, getting those students who we recruit to have a better set of skills, to get a better job and to live a better life. But it is what I touched upon before. We could be developing those skills, they could be getting jobs, but we're not retaining that talent within Bootle, for example. What could be happening is they're getting jobs outside of Liverpool City Region, or they're getting jobs within Liverpool City Region, but moving outside of Bootle. But it is a really tough nut to crack. It involves really strong institutional-led partnership, and it involves multiple personalities, and it involves multiple people, multiple departments. So I can understand the challenge of it, but unless we're truly going to get it right, then we need to think a little bit more wholesale about it. The one thing I do, and it is largely down to funding, so again, there are amazing people doing amazing stuff who are trying their very best. But even when I think about Bootle, we've got a phase 1. So what's the phase 2? What's the phase 3? And I can understand why the development of the phase 2 and the phase 3 might be delayed in regeneration when there's not necessarily that pot of gold at the end to understand where the funding's going to come from. But if we talk about some of the amazing stuff that's taking place in relation to, you've just mentioned Sandfield, how does that impact upon what's going to happen on the Strand? And then what happens in that gap between those two regeneration sites, and how we fill that, and what will that look like, and what's that long-term picture. So I don't think it's through a lack of trying, I still think we've got a way to go.
Yeah, I think we need really massively strong leadership on this. So I think it's never going to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist, and I think people will move around. but we've still got lessons to learn, and pulling that whole story together. One thing I value is when we get second and third wave of spending. So we make sure we spend the money wisely. So if we're doing a massive project down the road, which Chris mentioned, they do actually give a certain amount of that to local companies. They've got to be capable, they've got to be good enough, they've got to hit the standard, but people have to get that opportunity. Then ensuring that the training goes in, that there's opportunity to train the kids to go to Bootle, for instance, to get some construction training, then they get that opportunity. So it's the second wave of how we invest. But in terms of top level leadership, we're in a changing place. We have improved in the last couple of years. We've got historical problems which I won't talk about today. We know what they are, but we need massively strong leadership at local government level, and probably really strong links to central government as well.
Super.
I totally agree. We need a system approach to regeneration rather than project by project, phase by phase. It doesn't work. We need an approach that you can develop your program and you've got longevity in mind, and so that it can continue without public funding. So we need to be putting those mechanisms in at the beginning. And if you think about, we've got a project with the Manufacturing Technology Centre, which we worked for Liverpool City Region funded, called the Digital Manufacturing Accelerator. And it was led as a programme, not a project. And the idea of it was to develop the supply chain. So MTC bring the supply chain in. So we worked with 40 organisations, and those 40 organisations have developed their skills and the technology themselves. It's also attracted organisations to come in and be in Liverpool because they were aware that we're doing programmes like this. Now that programme is ready for the next phase. So when funding comes available, there's stuff there to be funded. And I think sometimes we act on a reactive basis to funding, in that we'll go, oh, there's a funding call, we need to all think of something we can put in for it. Whereas we've actually already got a lot that we just need to pull together, and we'd put ourselves in a better position to get the funding anyway.
So building on the existing partnership frameworks that exist, for example, thinking about supply chains. So maybe we just touch a little bit upon supply chains in terms of regen. Ordinarily, we think of physical regen, don't we, when we think about supply chains and such. So, Greg, obviously, supply chains are really important for you. It's obviously the source of some of your commercial activity.
Absolutely, yeah.
How successful do you think we are as a city and a city region in terms of stimulating supply chains and creating some of the opportunities for SMEs like yourself?
It's a bit of a bugbear, to be fair, Paul, for me, because what I hate to see is sort of projects on our doorstep, and I find maybe that the windows and doors maybe have been manufactured by a company in Birmingham or the Northeast or something like that. What I'd like really to see from sort of the local authority point of view would be some real sort of strong policy put in place whereby any sort of winning contractors or developers have maybe like a high percentage of a target for the supply chain to be sourced locally. And, it's all about, for me, it's about keeping the sort of the pound in the city region as well. If the private sector can benefit from Liverpool Council putting a little bit of pressure on the developers to actually buy locally, then businesses like mine, will be able to employ more people, and that just grows the local economy then, doesn't it, naturally and organically. So, definitely, when we talk about the Welsh Streets before, the pride you get as a local business to be involved in local projects.
Absolutely, yeah.
It really is, as a Scouser, and being involved in it, it really does sort of drive you on to do the next one and do the next one, and maybe a manufacturing company from Birmingham supplying into Liverpool doesn't really mean anything to them other than its sales, does it? So definitely like to see a little bit more of a stronger policy put in place whereby developers and winning contractors had to sort of source locally a little bit more.
And of course, the attraction as well is for other companies then to actually come in and settle with a meaningful presence in the city if they see some of those opportunities from councils, from universities, colleges, and organisations. Rachel, from your perspective again, Hugh Baird, we've discussed it, declaring an interest, obviously Governor Hugh Baird myself, but we've talked a lot about Hugh Baird College as an anchor institution, and it's got the spending power to really stimulate a very immediate, close, almost microeconomy around the town.
Yeah.
How does Hugh Baird see itself in that space in terms of being an opportunity for businesses, such as has been discussed, to get on those supply chains and to take advantage of some of the contractual opportunities that organisations like colleges actually have in terms of the spending power?
100%. If I would like to see that utopia by which if we eventually had a new build, it was, like-minded organisations in our locality benefiting from that project. But also, what I'd also like to see is that not strong arm approach, but that pressure of, it's our students who are working on that site. It's our students who are not, and I don't mean work experience. I mean employed. I mean apprenticeship provision. We are, as a consequence, then investing in our locality with our people, with our businesses. How can that not bring positive benefit to the local community and also Liverpool City Region as a whole? So again, it comes to that joined up approach though, doesn't it? It comes to that, how do you apply that pressure consistently to make sure that it's the people of benefit, the people of Liverpool who are benefiting, the organisations, the businesses of Liverpool that are benefiting. And it's not elitist, it's not a no one else can touch it, but the significant majority of people who are building within our city should be from our city, I think.
Chris, any views on this? So we've had offline conversations in the past, haven't we, about procurement and local supply chains and meet the buyer sessions and things like that. But what's your perspective on this? You work with loads of different suppliers. How do you see some of those procurement challenges?
I'll try and say this not too emotively.
Yeah.
So but obviously, as someone who's gone from a big global corporate to an SME, newly created in the city on the waterfront, doing local projects. It is a frustration, a real frustration. And I guess what we're not asking for is priority. We're asking for a level playing field. Because as an SME, and if you think about Liverpool's economy particularly, we know this from the Chamber of Commerce data, it has a fantastic SME community. A big portion of the economy is SMEs. And we're after a level playing field. And one of the things we really struggle with, and predominantly we are procured by public sector bodies, we struggle to have access to certain markets, to certain clients. And that's a frustration for us. As someone who, for 20 years has spent most of his working life out of the city, now there's so much development activity in the city, we're passionate, we want to get involved in it. So it's more about creating that level playing field. I think as a solution, I've had the pleasure of working on some major programs nationally for the DFE, for the NHS. And actually, one of the things they look to do on some of the bigger programs is to create temporary organisations around projects. And they don't procure individual companies to run particular projects. They almost have a best athlete approach. This is the setup of the project, and we will procure individuals based on their capability and credibility to fulfil certain functions. And I guess, for me, that would be a great way to look at some of these programmes of work in the city, because there's such scale in them. They need multiple people to be around them. So I think it's something to consider. But back to my original point, it's about a level playing field and giving SMEs like ourselves the opportunity to bid for work on a level playing field.
Sean, I'm going to ask you your opinions on this, because we've had conversations around the importance of quality, credibility, trust, and making sure that in the public procurement process that you are getting quality in and you're getting organisations and people who are going to deliver the job legitimately, properly, etc. What's your experience around sort of bidding in for public contracts, but also, as Chris has pointed out, what potential improvements could be made?
Yeah, it's difficult on this question because we actually predominantly most of our staff are out of this region. But we're only doing 30% of our work in the region. So it's a problem I've complained about previously. And that means we're probably, I'm trying to get this right around, we're probably an exporter of our talent, aren't we? But the money's getting spent locally. So we can't just completely block the door and let people not come into the city, think it's our city, because then that means that the talent that we're doing outside, it's got to work both ways. But equally, one of the huge frustrations is occasionally, and it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen occasionally, where we miss out to some organisation who's based out of London, travels up on the train, And I'm thinking that's not really good value for the project or for us. We're missing out. So I think there's some mechanisms in there to fix. A couple of the barriers that we've talked about is making sure the procurement process doesn't preclude an SME from doing the work. So it could be a barrier. We want a company with £50 million worth of turnover, 25 million pounds worth of PI, which then that just means the only companies that can go in on that level are the big international, multinational type of companies. So then we miss out on that. And as you were saying, with Liverpool economy being 90, I think it might be 90 plus, might be 95% actually, is SMEs. That means we're missing out on that huge pool of work. There's huge work to do in that. One thing I do think in Liverpool is that there's maybe stretching into the further questions, is there's a huge opportunity on this region. So when we start to fix a few more of these things and build in the economies to enable us to grow, we will grow. Which then leads me to the final part of that, is Liverpool economy needs to grow to fulfill all of our ambitions. Well, I'll pass the ball back to you now again.
Yeah, no, that's really, really helpful, Sean, because I think it does paint the picture there, doesn't it, about, you know, how procurement and how public sector procurement particularly can stimulate other aspects around, you know, obviously, you know, skills development and such. So you just touch on some of your supply chain comments earlier.
Yeah.
What kind of outcomes have you seen as a result of some of that intensive supply chain work? Because we've got Sean's point there about, you know, making sure the system isn't almost, you know, geared against SMEs with, you know, some of the requirements that are put in place that are barriers. But your work, you at the MTC are working almost in terms of how do we enable SMEs to be prepared for whatever process is actually undertaken. So how do you see some of the successes beginning to emerge from that?
So at the minute, we're going through a transformation of the construction sector where government is driving us towards more manufacturing-led approaches. And that means that SMEs right through to, you know, big organisations are all going to have to adapt to new technology, to innovative ways of doing things, new processes. So it's important that we enable the supply chain to do that, and that's by skilling up. That's by enabling them to adopt the right technologies. We're seeing a lot of organisations who are diving in and investing in technology, but they haven't got the right processes in place. They haven't got the right skills in place to be able to deal with it. And to be honest, it's money that's being wasted. It might be the case of, you know, you don't need robots right now. What you need is a tin of red paint and just reorganise the way you're doing things. So it's really important that the support is there. And I think by us adopting a collaborative cluster approach in the region, we can make sure that we're all coming together to provide that support.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because again, when we think about regeneration as this big umbrella term, and you know, we've not touched upon like AI today so far. We've touched a little bit on net zero, but there's, as you say, there's a huge amount of stuff around robotics. But as you say, sometimes for an organisation where it's at, it needs something relatively, or what we would consider relatively simple, to make improvements and changes within their own organisations. Now, you've touched upon skills, which is a lovely segue now, Rachel. The challenge for SMEs, how do you ensure that your skill set within the organisation is keeping up to date with what's required in industry more generally? It's a nice, easy one for you to solve, obviously.
It is definitely
So-
sorted it, haven't I? I could write a thesis on this.
Before you all send your 80,000 word theses into us, you know, on the Chamber website, how do colleges in particular adapt to some of this challenge?
Yeah, I think what I would say is we will always have a skills gap. I don't think there's enough people out there at times to plug our skills gap. So it's not a case that we're not moving in the right direction as a collaboration of colleges and training providers, and in order to address some of those skills gaps. So every single day I see our organisation and another organisation working in a proactive way with employers to understand what their pipeline of future employees are, so that we can help to address their needs. When I've seen it work really well, ultimately it's built upon co-production, co-delivery. What we've got to understand is people don't necessarily train to be a teacher in advanced manufacturing. usually what happens is our teachers, our trainers in advanced manufacturing are coming straight out of industry, and they're coming from a higher paid job to be a teacher who's on a lower paid salary. And so that can cause attention. And so therefore, I believe that in order to move further to meet the skills gap, it is around that co-design and co-delivery. There's lots of organisation, they have the expertise within that, their organisation, on a specialist skill that teachers up and down the country don't necessarily have, and actually colleges and training providers can't afford to recruit. Yeah. So the way I've seen it work really well is co-design and co-delivery. That meeting of the skills gap is usually built on really strong relationships that are fostered over time. So when you see organisations really addressing it, it's where I know exactly what Greg's future employee needs is, and we are working together not only on qualifications but also on skills and values. So you want this qualification, but you want these values, you want this individual to be able to turn up to work on time, to be able to communicate. Those things that aren't necessarily easy to train or within a qualification. It's also built with honest communication. So if I'm working with Sean and he says, you know, you're my training provider for X, and actually these individuals aren't cutting the mustard, the best collaboration is when Sean said, I need a bit more of this, Rachel, I need a little bit less. That honest dynamic, if we're going to address that needs of the skills gap. There are, and I've thought about it a lot, and I've read a few more articles in relation to that skills gap and some of the challenges that we face, because I sometimes think we think as business and training providers, well, that's why we can't make it happen, because we're just not connecting. And actually there is a multitude of factors that we need to consider. So, for example, let's just think about the pot of people that we're dealing with in order to be able to meet skills gaps. We could be talking, if we categorise them, we could be talking between the ages of 16 to 24 as one pot, and there's only so many of them out there. Whether they choose to exit school and go straight into industry, exit post-16 education, regardless of what format that is, and go into industry or go into HE, I think that will probably only accommodate for 1/3 of the skills gaps that we've currently got at the moment. Then we've got those individuals who are in a sector and they want to get into a different sector. So they're in retail and they want to get into manufacturing. They're usually adults, they've got a salary coming in every single month, they've got responsibilities, they've got family. How do we encourage them to leave the job that is paying their wages and go into education? And then when you, I could talk about it all day, but then when you align that with some of the challenges of the shape and the format of the qualifications, a lot of employees that I talk to don't want a year-long qualification. They don't want their people missing in education. They don't want an apprenticeship for 12 to 18 months or 3 years. So how do you take that person who wants to come out of retail, wants to go retrain and do something different, and say, come to a college, come to a training provider, and you can stick with us for a year? Well, who's going to pay their salary for the year? So they are definitely some of the challenges that I think we, without a shadow of doubt, face. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and I always say this, we could create the best provision that truly meets the needs of Greg. But unless those people, those young individuals, fully understand what the opportunities are out there through strong information, advice and guidance, we will have empty courses, whether they are modularised and only last for 12 weeks or last for a year, because we won't get enrolment onto them. So I think about port and logistics. We constantly push as an organisation, raising the profile of the port and logistics sector. But students aren't coming to us from secondary school to do port and logistics. They're coming to be brickies, they're coming to do C&J, they're coming to go into health. They're not coming to us saying, I want to be an electrotechnical engineer. And so that leaves vacancies on courses. So it is all about information, advice and guidance really early on. And I do think business has a part to play on that, as well as post-16 providers.
I don't want to deviate too much from skills, but I think it's a really interesting point around almost the pipeline of opportunity and how that is important to business, but also important to particularly younger people who maybe are considering their career choices and are looking ahead. So just any observations around that, you know, in terms of how do we create almost an awareness of those pipeline of opportunities, you know?
It's going back to what we were talking about regeneration and enabling clear visibility of what that pipeline is and putting the right process and policies in place that say, you know, it's all very reactive at the moment. It's, you know, we plan to have regeneration going on. We've known for years we were going to get an Everton Stadium. We've known for years, you know, we know what's coming up on Paddington Village. We know what's coming up on Liverpool Waters, and yet the supply chain's not in place. We're not looking at what skills are going to be required for for the future buildings, how they're going to be built, what manufacturing is going to be needed. So therefore, your manufacturers aren't able to scale up. They're not able to, you know, work out how many units they're going to have to deliver. You know, you might go, well, if I'm going to be delivering X amount of doors and windows, well, I'll invest X amount into my business, ready for that, but that guarantee's not there.
It's interesting when you think back, you know, at the start we talked about a little bit about, you know, Liverpool's renaissance as a post-industrial city, and when you think about those early 2000s, you had the big dig, you had Liverpool One, the arena, you almost had that almost line of succession of projects that were coming up. I suppose, Greg, from your perspective, would another Welsh Street happen? Will it happen? Are you aware of whether, or you know, how reactive or proactive are we at the moment, and what needs to change?
Yeah, no, I think that's part of my argument before about wanting something in place whereby I know there's going to be guarantee for local businesses to at least, you know, tender for the projects that are coming up, because there is an awful lack of communication, and I think Sue touched on the point before quite well, that the part of the problem is we do have to outsource our sort of supply chain from other cities, because there is lack of communication. We don't know what, you know, projects are coming up in the future, and maybe we don't have the infrastructure as well to be able to cope, and that's why we do have to deviate. But from our perspective, it's just being able to have that opportunity first and foremost. You know, we're not saying that everything has to be bought and supplied from the city region. We're not closing ourselves off by any stretch of the imagination, but if we had that communication, and as Sean touched on a little bit earlier as well, that leadership as well, to be able to help sort of manufacturing businesses like us, and then we can scale up. We can invest in machinery, and we can take on more sort of staff, because we know that we're going to be given the opportunity, and then we'd be confident in our product and our service, that to say, yeah, well, we'll be given the opportunity and we'll win the opportunity, and we'll be able then to kick on. So communication, leadership, and things like that, I think would be really important.
Yeah, and what if in this utopia where you had that long-term view of what was going to happen, and as a consequence you had that long-term view of a business, you invested within your capital estate in order to be able to scale up, and you were simultaneously having conversation with me as a further education provider who's got thousands of young people and older people to say, in order to be able to meet that project, I need 10 of X people, I need 5 of Y, and I need 4 of Z. And then we drive our provision in order to provide that for Greg. So, and then that business, it sounds really simple to me.
It's that domino effect.
It is 100%, because then what would happen is those people who are living within that community that your business is established and are studying at Hugh College or a training provider, and this isn't about, you know, my college is the only college. I'm a massive believer in collaboration, because there is more than enough to go around. It's about how we work together. But imagine if our students were the students who were getting your jobs, and then as a consequence investing their money back into Bootle, and they were living in a high quality house, and they had a better health, better prospects and better aspirations, and they stayed within Bootle and got rid of that generational disparity in relation to inequalities. That utopia sounds... It's simple, Sean.
Could I just put sort of
Is it easy to do?
No, it's not. A realistic view on what one of the problems that we've just talked about is the pipeline's never fixed. There's always gaps in the pipeline. It never happens as you plan. So all the big projects we've just talked about did not just go... They went up and down. And what I would probably suggest is most businesses probably need more work than they can cope with, because it always gets stalled. So I think for SMEs, it's really difficult to invest in that fantastic piece of kit that makes windows, because you need the 1,000 doors or the 1,000 windows. And if the projects aren't guaranteed, and they're very, very rarely guaranteed in the construction development sector till quite late on, I promise to give you that job, and we'll sign contracts on the basis of it, but it's only when the contract comes through that you've actually achieved it. Just something else we touched on before was about technology. I'm going to change it actually now. We talked about getting closer to net zero. What an opportunity for the city, an amazing opportunity. So we do need better energy provisions. We do need cheap energy. We need it to be for free. We've got issues around global warming. We've had a flooding issue in the city. We've got issues around flooding. So there's a real opportunity there for us in the city to be a true leader. And I think we're playing that on an even field with other with other big cities, because none of them have actually hit it.
Yeah.
But there's a huge opportunity for the colleges and for businesses. So we are doing a little bit around that. We get involved in flooding and the flood studies, and a little bit about some bits on retrofit and putting bits on the roofs. But as I said, that's an industry that hasn't been created yet.
But what I will say is I feel like we are joined in that. We are joined up in relation to that. So we've spent as colleges, a collection of colleges, the last 18 months looking at modularised curriculum around hydrogen. What does that look like? What is it that's needed? Electrification of vehicles, retrofitting, and now we're moving into the second.
I love the debate. That's until that actually happens and it feeds its way through.
Yeah.
'Cause I think at the moment we're at 1%. So there's another 99% of that to go. So I think, again, a huge opportunity. The colleges are doing their bit, but it isn't actually feeding its way through to the clients and the work.
Yeah, but that takes time, doesn't it, as well?
Absolutely, a huge opportunity.
Because in a lot of these sectors that we're talking about, just to be devil's advocate.
Yeah, I love it.
A lot of these sectors that we're talking about, there is still a lack of clarity in relation to the skills and that's needed.
Very
And
much
actually, the qualifications don't exist in a number of these green spaces that we're talking about. When we're talking about tidal power, when we're talking about hydrogen, it all sounds fantastic, but we've got to develop that.
Somebody clever said this, you've got to start with an idea. We've got the idea, and then we have to make it into something real.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's critical.
Chris, you were going to come in.
Yeah, I think the thing we all agree on is the private sector's got a role to play, and I had the pleasure of doing some of the engagement with Rachel and the team at Hugh Baird, and what a fantastic opportunity to help shape the skills agenda for the future. And right, there's a relative unknown. The skills for the present aren't the skills for the future, and there's a gap. But actually, from a personal perspective, one of the other things which was really useful for me, and particularly in an SME environment, so attracting talent to our business when you don't have the big brand is hard. And we constantly challenge ourselves around any big decision related to the business. How does that positively impact the employee experience for people who work for us? And actually having the benefit to talk to people like, Rachel's pupils and staff about what the workplace needs to look like. What is a day in the life of working for Hive Projects look like and feel like? And it is an unknown, and no job is the same. So actually there is a twofold benefit to that. And I think the private sector, we often are too busy with the here and the now and what we need to do. We do need to invest more time with people like Rachel to shape the curriculum, but also learn from those who are coming through about what the workplace of the future needs to look like.
I've heard regeneration has been discussed in terms of repurposing in the past. I've heard the terminology can be adapted. I just wanted to get some thoughts from you, very quick thoughts about where you feel we are as a city in the city region now, as a place to invest, as a place to see the pipeline coming through, as a place where you can see economic growth coming to fruition. Just very, very quickly from each one of you. You can do it as a mark out of 10. You can do it as an Ofsted grading if you want, Rachel. Where do you all feel we are at the moment? Sean, I'm going to start with you.
Wow. So we're in the middle. We're not. I don't think we're actually really good at this yet. So I do think we're actually probably in the middle. I can see so many things if I was in a position of power to improve things and communication that I would like to see. But then the opportunity that we have, we've got huge talent here. There's some great people in the city. We've got some great colleges, great universities. I think we've got the talent there to develop. So I think if we were looking for somebody to invest in this region, once we get it all working, we won't be 5, we'll be 10. So we could actually get much bigger growth in this region, and we have had this in previous years, much bigger growth in this region than Manchester is the powerhouse in the region, and even London in some respects. And that's where we should be aiming.
Thanks, Sean. Sue.
Yes, the biggest attraction to the region is talent. And I love this. This is one of the Future Impact Board's quotes, was they said the race for talent is over. Talent's won. Because your young professionals now will go, they want jobs, and they want to work for organisations that care about their mental health and their well-being. They want the work-life balance is really important to them. And businesses need to provide that to keep them here, as well as we need the office space. And we've still got Liverpool Science Park, it's full, And we've got businesses in there that need to expand, and they're stuck in the science park. So we need the office space as well. We need good quality office space in the city region. Yeah, but I think the retaining talent is, we've got the talent, you're spot on, but we're not good at keeping it. And we're not good at promoting it either, because we've got the best universities here. We need to be promoting more our talent, and we need to be finding ways to keep them.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Chris?
Yes, my old employer, Arcadis, did a report some years ago, and it looked at ranking all the cities nationally. You might remember it, Paul, and actually ranked Liverpool top of the list in terms of investment potential. And it feels like we are realising that potential. You know, we couldn't have sat here a few years ago and reeled off some of the fantastic projects that will have a positive effect on the city. I would argue I'd give a different score to the regions. So we're working at Alder Hey, we're working down at Bootle. I think we have a massive inclusivity issue. So I think we can't lose focus on the wider city region as well. And we know Manchester, probably better than us, pulls on its districts and has much more collaboration with the districts. So I think there's work to do there. But yeah, I think in terms of potential, it feels like we're making good strides forward, and yeah, positive future ahead.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. Greg?
Yeah, I'd probably echo somewhere in the middle of Chris and Sean, to be fair. I think for me, it's positive. You only need to look at, I was reading some LBN articles recently, and there was an article about St Helens town centre getting regenerated. Obviously, we spoke about the Strand before. There's plenty going on the Wirral. Southport seems to be doing some good things as well at this moment in time. So there does seem to be a lot of positivity, and it fills you with a lot of hope. But again, I think, like Sean said, we've still got that potential to sort of tap into as well. Do you know what I mean? We're not quite there yet. Whilst there's positive sort of feelings about it, let's actually kick on and do them, and then progress again and do more. You know what I mean? Sort of thing. So, but yes, definitely positivity in the city region, and I think that comes as well with the leadership in the council and some really good things in the Well Connected magazine. Really good positive comments from Liam Robinson recently, and sat on some of the roundtable events, haven't we, at the Chamber with Nuala Gallagher and Sophie Beavan and stuff, and you can really see their input from an early stage. A lot of sort of positivity, and it seemed to be good people who care already about the city and have had good proven success in the past in other cities. So yeah, so a lot of positivity, but again, like I say, a lot of potential still to fulfil.
Thanks, Rick. And final words for you, Rachel. You're going to single-handedly transform Bootle.
No, I thought no. So I've worked in the education sector for probably about 22 years now, and a significant proportion of that, in fact, all bar for about 4 or 5 years, has been outside of the Liverpool City region. I've always stayed in Liverpool because my mum swore she'd kill me if I ever moved out. So I've always had to do that travelling. And actually, there is 100% no place that I would rather be. And it is largely as a consequence of what you said, Sean. And so is we've got the talent here. I work with them every single day. The students, be they young or old, the passion that they have, the politeness they have is second to none in any other college that I've ever worked in. I think there is, I think we are about 50% of the way there, but I am an eternal optimist. But I do agree with what Chris spoke about. I have every faith in Liverpool as a place, Liverpool City. The place that I would like to see a push on a little bit more is that wider Liverpool City region. I base myself in Bootle every single day, and there is a difference between Bootle and Liverpool, without a shadow of a doubt, but it is most definitely that pushing of that inclusive growth and making sure that everybody, every community across the whole of Liverpool City region is reaping the benefits of what an amazing place this is. But I have no doubt we're going to get there. Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you all for participating today, giving your insights. Thank you to anyone who's taken the time to view today's session. Thank you for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation today, and look forward to joining us at the next Voice of Business session here at the MSP Studios in Bootle. Thank you.